Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight for our presentation and tasting of olive oil and culture. We're very excited to have you here tonight, and especially excited to welcome Giuli Dussias, the head of our Department of Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese, and Lauren Halberstadt, our assistant teaching professor and director of engaged scholarship for the department. Before I turn things over to Lauren to kick things off, just a few housekeeping items for you. We will be taking questions later on this evening. If you scroll to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a chat feature. If you have any questions, please feel free to click on that chat button and submit your questions, and we will keep track of those throughout the night. Whenever the question comes to your mind, feel free to just type it in then, and we'll collect those questions and ask them at the end. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lauren. Lauren, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thank you for that awesome introduction, Bill. We appreciate it. And thank you all for coming tonight. It's really nice to see some familiar faces, some past classmates who are subjected to some of the same things I'm going to talk about, some friends, some alumni, and some new friends that we'll meet tonight. So thank you all for coming out or staying home, right? And going, back to your computers after the long day. So why do we care about olive oil? Why are we doing this tonight? Why are we getting together? Well, wild olives have been collected as early as the Stone Age period, and olive trees were domesticated in the Mediterranean basin. Therefore, olive became a staple for the ancient Greeks and Roman cuisine. And from these ancient times until today, olive oil has had an important place in many economies and has been used for cooking, skincare, religious ceremonies, and many other things. Olive oil is a critical part of the culture and livelihood of many communities around the world. We care about its use, about it introducing it to our students, and most of all, Giuli and I care about consuming it. We're not olive oil experts nor producers of olive oil ourselves, but we are appreciators of olive oil, and we do spend some time getting our students interested in olive oil and getting them to learn about it and use it and even cook with it.
All right, so I just want to briefly introduce myself. I am Giuli Dussias, as has been told. I'm the head of the Department of Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. And I actually see here in the Zoom some old friends and also some former students, undergraduate students, who are actually here. Thank you for coming. And current graduate students as well. And some of these former undergraduate students have actually tasted the olive oil that my father makes and my mother-in-law makes. So it's so wonderful to have them in this event. So thank you for coming.
And as Bill mentioned, my job is Director of Engaged Scholarship. So I come up with some programs for the department, some new ways to engage our students. And one of those is a program I'll talk to you in a little bit. But that's how you're stuck listening to me tonight, right? So I get to do these sort of fun events and engage our alumni and our students in some new and innovative programs. In our department, we teach languages, of course, right? We're the Department of Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese, but we also aim to teach how language is used in the real world. So we create opportunities for our students to engage in this intersection of language and culture. When it's safe, we have faculty-led programs that take students abroad to the Mediterranean, where they complete coursework and experience life and are exposed to olive oil. So here I want to point out 3 different sets of programs, all of which I've had the privilege of being connected to in the past. On the left, if you see the map marks in blue, you'll see they're located in Spain. That is the Ronda and the Cadiz sister programs. These programs focus on integrating our Spanish students within Spain's culture with homestays and immersion activities. On the right, you see in purple, the Todi Italy program. This is where our Italian students study culture and language right in the heart of Italy, in a very, very small town where no English is spoken. It is a great way to get to practice your Italian. Finally, in green, you'll see that there is one point located in Madrid and a second location in Prato, Italy. This is one program that will take students to both locations. This is called the Multilingual and Intercultural Communication course, and it's a brand new embedded course that's open to all of our students. So whether they study Spanish, Italian, or Portuguese, they all can attend. And because it's designed as an embedded course, students will have an in-residence course this fall in 2021, followed by travel to Spain and Italy in May 2022, fingers crossed. And this course will teach students to use their language skills in a variety of cultural contexts to prepare them to be global leaders, right? And for careers that are international. So now you can see that there are plenty of opportunities in these locations for our students to experience different olive oils. In Spain, for example, olives are presented at nearly every meal as soon as you sit down at the table. In Italy, it's difficult to find a meal where olive oil is not used, especially in the South. And in addition to exposure in these programs, our students take cooking classes where they're exposed to making new recipes that use olive oil.
So my family has a long history with olive oil. My father is from a very small town in the southern part of Italy. It's called Forenza. It sounds like Firenze, but it's not Firenze, it's Forenza. And you can see it right there designated on the map on the left. So my father used to own a house there with olive groves, as well as machinery where he used to use to press the olive oil. And in fact, he was the first person in his hometown to own an olive oil machine, a pressing machine. You can see there in the pictures, his house and the trees. And my father purposely designed this house to be welcoming with yellow colors and orange colors. And we would spend a lot of time there, a lot of summers there in the patio eating, and of course, tasting his olive oil. And in fact, my daughter's first birthday was celebrated there. Not pictured in what you can see right now, but behind the house, it still is a building. And it was a kind of a shed where my father had his olive oil pressing equipment. So we will talk later about, how to make olive oil. We'll just talk a little bit about it. But I just wanted to say that my parents did basically everything by hand. My mother picked the olive oils and she cleaned them and she prepared them. And then my dad pressed the olives into olive oil. And all of this had to happen within 12 hours from the time the olives are picked, so that they don't become acid. So acidity is very, very important in olive oil. And ever since I've lived here in the US, my parents, I've never bought olive oil. My parents would always ship it from Italy. And when my parents actually moved to the US, my mother-in-law decided to ship olive oil from Greece. And that's the olive oil that some of the students present here this evening have tried. So as I said earlier, and Lauren, I guess we can move to the next slide. My parents moved to the United States about 10 years ago, and they sold their olive oil farm. So for this particular event, I reached out to friends of ours who live also in Forenza. And they too produce olive oil. And in fact, they have confirmed that they continue making olive oil the same way that it used to be done centuries ago. This is the Azienda Agricola Saluzzi. And they actually began producing first honey and then pasta. And then finally, they added olive oil. And I bring this up to highlight a few points. First, there is a very long-lasting tradition of olive oil in the southern region of Italy. And second, the olive oil is very, very important in the economy. So in this very small town of 2,000, it's a 2,000-person town, my father's hometown. You have a place where, he first brought the machinery, and now there is this company that makes thousands of bottles of olive oil and sells them around the world. On the next slide, you can see on the right, my cousin Carmela. She actually now owns the house that my father used to have, and there she's picking olives by hand. Now, she uses a tool to shake the branches to bring the olives down, and then the leaves and the stems are attached to them. And then the tarp that you see below catches everything. And this is the process that my family used to use for decades, and his mother before that, and her mother before that. So as I said before, it is very crucial that olive oil gets pressed between 12 to 24 hours because when the olive oil begins to get warm, it begins to ferment, and then and the acidity level rises, and it just doesn't taste the same. So in the next slide, you see a very brief video, and what you see on the right is two people picking the olives by hand. And you can see how the olives drop to the tarp below. Lauren?
Much of what Giuli has described for you is outlined here. Olives are harvested in the fall and pressed immediately, as soon as possible. To obtain extra virgin olive oil, the acidity must be below 8%, and the oil must come from the first press, right? So we always see that extra virgin olive oil labeling. That's what it means. The olives are washed and crushed into a paste from which that oil is then extracted, and a centrifuge separates the oil from the water. That resulting oil is then stored in stainless steel tank to await the bottling.
So as an Italian living in the US, and I have lots of friends that know about the olive oil family history, I always hear people asking me about myths about olive oil. So I thought I would share with you some of the myths surrounding olive oil and some of the do's and don'ts regarding olive oil. So the first important do is do purchase olive oil in dark bottles. And you'll see that most high quality olive oil actually does come in dark bottles. They tend to be greenish. This actually will help the light from penetrating the oil and warming it up. And as I said earlier, when it warms up, the acidity comes up and it ferments. You should also store olive oil in a cool, dark place like your pantry. And don't leave it on your counter or in places where there can be sunlight. And in fact, many of you who have probably visited Mediterranean countries have noticed that, if you go to a cafe, the olive oil is actually not sitting there. The bottle of olive oil is not sitting there. People bring it to you. And the real reason people bring it to you is because they don't want the sunlight to actually spoil the olive oil. Now, some people believe that the color of olive oil can tell you something about the quality, and that is not the case. When you're buying, in fact, when you're buying in a dark bottle, you really can't see the color in advance. So don't really rely on the color to tell you something about the quality, but rather look at the label and read about, there are labels that actually are certified olive oil or extra virgin olive oil, and that should be able to tell you something about the quality. The final myth that I wanted to share with you is one myth that has renewed popularity, and which is that you cannot fry food with olive oil. And that is absolutely not true. People have been frying olive oil for centuries and around the world. And in a place, for example, in a place where my parents grew up, that's the only fat they had, olive oil. So it is absolutely not true that you cannot fry with olive oil. You can. Lauren?
So olive oil has had a very long-standing influence on American culture. So to bring this, a bit closer to home. So when immigrants came to the United States from the Mediterranean, like my family who came through Ellis Island, they brought their love of olive oil with them. In the 1880s, trade routes were established for olive oil, and they were set up to bring Italian, Spanish, and Greek olive oils to the United States. In the early 1900s, Olive Oil was a popular comic character who later came to be known as the wife of Popeye, right? And in the 1990s, the health benefits of olive oil were widely promoted by a nonprofit called Old Ways. And this is when the Mediterranean diet cookbooks, right, started popping up all over. Really recently, Samin Nosrat, who's an American chef, came out with her book and coordinating Netflix series called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And the show has an episode on each one of those topics. If you go to Netflix and you want to watch this, Giuli and I loved it, so we recommend it. But if you watch the Fat episode, she goes to Italy, and there's a segment where she tastes olive oil and learns about the olive oil process. Finally, in 2020, as a response to the pandemic, Little House Confections began making olive oil cakes to raise money for Covenant House of California's support for children who were in need because of the pandemic. And these cakes became Instagram sensations when celebrities started buying them and posting about these cakes on their social media. So just like a few snippets of how olive oil is constantly present in our pop culture and how it's an important, pervasive, and continuing part of American culture. So now for the good stuff. Let's get to the tasting. At this time, what we're going to do is we're going to do the olive oil tasting, but I'm going to model it first, and then we'll invite you to join in and do your own tasting. We've also appointed 2 guest tasters who will kick off the sort of sharing section of tonight so that they can give you the review of the olive oils that they have on hand. We recommended a few olive oils in advance. If you saw that, there's no need to taste a certain type of olive oil. You can taste something special. You can taste what you have in your pantry and you're cooking all the time. And then, you know, we'll all sort of discuss what we're experiencing. So the first thing we want to do is have your glass for tasting. If you have a wine glass or a shot glass, I have a wine glass here like this. No shortage of wine glasses in my house. And if not, you can taste from a spoon. I don't know that I recommend pouring the bottle directly in your mouth, but you know, however you want to taste the olive oil is fine. We're going to taste it plain, just taste the olive oil on its own first. But if you have some toast or some tomatoes or something on hand that you want to try the olive oil with next, we definitely recommend that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do step number 1, and we're just going to follow all of these. And what you'll notice is first we're going to experience smelling it, and then we're going to move on to experiencing tasting it. So first you want to take your glass and you want to put a few tablespoons of olive oil in your tasting glass. I don't know what the appropriate amount of time is to wait for someone to pour olive oil in a wine glass on Zoom. These things are much easier when we're in the same room, right? But I'll assume that you're right, Giuli. You think we're getting there?
Yeah, I think that you know, people will slowly go ahead and do this. You know, we give people a little bit of time, but I think we can go ahead and move to tasting it. And in fact, this is what happens in places where they make olive oil. They will have very small, what look like shot glasses. Is that what they're called? Mm-hmm. And so they are laying all over the company, you know, the place, the machinery, because people just, as the olive oil is coming out from the pipes, from the tubes, you know, the people just put the little shot glass under the olive oil and then just take a sip and then continue working. Mm-hmm. That's a dangerous thing for me. I'll be tasting.
Seriously. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to have you cover whatever glass you're using with your hand, if it fits, if you have a glass that's not too wide at the top. And what you're going to do is warm the glass a little bit by cupping your hand underneath. So you have this sort of sandwiching of your glass. And you're going to do a little bit of a swirl to sort of warm that up and get it to stick to the side. And before you move your hand, you want to get it real close to your nose so that you can take a nice sniff of the olive oil before you let all the air escape. And so now what you want to be thinking about is, what do you smell? Is it really green and ripe, or is it more mature? Is it very fruity? Does it remind you of anything? Is it something you've had before? Is it the first time you're trying this olive oil? Once you've had a nice smell, to engage those senses, you're going to take a sip, and you want to take enough that it can cover your tongue. And you want to think about what notes you catch, right? So go ahead and take a sip. And is there any bitterness? Once you've swallowed, is there pungency that remains in your throat? Is something really balanced, or is there something really dominating about that flavor? If you're like, holy cow, I did not like drinking olive oil, you can have some still or sparkling water to sort of rinse that down and get ready for your next one. Or you can move on to using the oil on bread or bruschetta or, you know, whatever, cheese, some mozzarella, some basil, whatever you have on hand to taste its different flavors, because tasting it alone is a little bit than tasting it you know, on some sort of food.
Lauren,
so this time,
Lauren,
excuse me, I hate to interrupt.
Sorry,
we did have a question related to the tasting itself. Yeah. Somebody asked if they should try any particular olive oil first. Should they try the Italian one first, or is there any particular olive oil they should be trying at this point?
The olive oils that we recommended were all high quality olive oils. We just selected from different places, that way people could see some slight differences between them. So the truth is that it doesn't really matter. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
That's a great question. And I think what we would just recommend is, if you're trying multiple ones, which is, you know, the fun of it, take a sip of water between them, or, you know, bite of bread, so that way you can really experience the differences, because sometimes it's quite tricky to find what's different. You know, sometimes you could really feel that pungency difference between them, but if you can sort of cleanse your palate, you could feel a little bit more of those more nuanced flavors. So because we're all tasting different numbers of olive oils, and because we're all tasting different types, we are going to ask our guest tasters, if they're ready, to give us their quick reviews of the olive oils that they've tasted. So these are alumni from our department that I will introduce to you, and they're going to get the ball rolling, sort of open up, you know, the conversation and make people feel comfortable for being a novice olive oil taster, right? So first, I'd like to introduce Sue Hodges, and she's going to tell us a little bit about which olive oil she's tasting and what she thinks about it.
Lauren, could I ask you to stop sharing the screen so folks can see Sue and our other guests a little more clearly? Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think Sue needs to be unmuted, maybe.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. Just as a prelude, I went to a store recently. I needed some olive oil, and it had like a giant selection. And I thought, oh my God, and how can I pick these? I don't know any of them. And I said, okay, I'm gonna look for Spanish, because I love Spanish olive oil. I couldn't find a label or anything. I was reading down the fine print, where are these olives from? So I said, all right, the heck with it. I'm just gonna buy one where I like the way the bottle looks, and it looks fairly high class. So I got this, this unfiltered extra virgin olive oil, first cold press, 100% organic, Carapelli from Firenze, 1893. So that told me these guys have been in business for a long time. I'm gonna do it. And just like Lauren was talking about, how you're talking about smelling it and tasting it, well, food appeal is with the eye too. So this particular bottle very much appeals to my sense of beauty. So even before I taste it, I can tell you right now, I like something about it already. Yeah. This is my Chinese cup to try this in. Wow, it smells clean and fresh to me. Very fresh. Take a taste. It's very suave. It's very, it's not bitter at all, and it has no bite afterwards. So it's perfect for what I use it for, which is making cornbread for my husband. All right. Do we have enough time for me to try another?
I think we'll move on to our next. Do we have time, Ellen? Yeah. Ellen says yes.
Do it? Okay. I decided I wanted to find one, and I found it said Spanish. And this is from 3 different varieties of olive oils in Spain. I'm not going to tell you what they are right now, but This one, it's like a, I don't know how to explain what that is, but it's more potent than the other one. This one has a big bite to it, a huge bite, which is what I noticed when I came back to the United States from Spain. All I could get was Italian olive oil, and it didn't bite like the Spanish. So if I'm looking for that Spanish bite, here it is. That's it.
Thanks so much for sharing, Sue. Yeah, digital round of applause. The quietest round of applause, but I hope you feel it. Feel the support. And I think that really shows you that you can't just, pick one. I know that, my friends and family all go to the store and they pick one and then they sort of use it for a decade, right? You just sort of pick what you're used to, but really any two you could pick off the shelf could have a really different experience and taste profile. So the next person I roped into helping us today is Mike Mchugh. Mike sat with me through our Dante Alighieri classes, and so we were longtime friends and collaborators in Italian program. And Mike will tell you about his experience and explain which olive oils he's tasting tonight.
So first of all, Lauren, thank you so much for hosting this. This is a fantastic event. So I bought all 4 of the Whole Foods olive oils, the Seville, the Portugal, the Greece, and the Italy. And I think I'm biased because I studied Italian, but I thought the Italy one wasn't the best. So, but I'll do the full tasting now because I kind of cheated beforehand and just skipped to the good tasting stuff. So I would say the smell is definitely very mild and smooth. And the taste is also very smooth. It goes down very easily. It's not as bitter as some of the other ones. And then I think probably this would be great for finishing, or even maybe putting on a salad or something like that with some pepper and salt. So, but yeah, the Italian one is my favorite.
Thanks so much, Mike. Yeah, it is hard to be biased, right, towards our own experiences, but maybe that's okay. If this is the type of place where our biases come out, maybe that's all right. Thank you to Sue and Mike. A round of applause for Mike and for Sue. Thank you for kicking us off. We wanted to ask some novice olive oil tasters so that we could open the floor and everyone can feel comfortable. I'm gonna pass now the mic to Giuli. She's gonna say a few words before we fully end the official formal part of the program.
Okay, there we go. So there are some questions on the chat. So I don't know, Bill, whether you want to take the questions on the chat first.
Sure. I'll work my way through those questions. So we do have some others that have been submitted other ways as well, but we will definitely start with some of the ones that we got in the chat. Mm-hmm. The first one was, are you familiar with the Nudo olive oil program?
Yeah, I think it's in the Nudo program, a program that where you buy, you buy trees for olive oil. I mean, I don't know a whole bunch about it, but I've heard about it. And if I'm not mistaken, it's a program where people buy olive trees, and then I mean, I don't know everything about it. Maybe the individual who asked the question could say more about it, because clearly they know about the program, and it'd be nice for everybody else to know about it.
Sure, we can see if we can, let me see if we can ask the questioner, Randy, if you're willing, Randy Sones, who is also our Alumni Society Board President. Hello, Randy. If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and asking maybe a little bit more about.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, it's a program you can participate in. You can go on the internet and look it up. It's NUDO, and my wife got it for me for my birthday, and we've probably been participants for 5 or 6 years now. It's great olive oil. They send you different varieties. You get 4 cans a quarter, and it's really nice.
Yeah, and nudo means in Italian it means naked, but it doesn't really mean naked without clothes. It means like pure nudo. So like the color, nude is the same sort of color. It's a color that it's yes.
Interesting.
Nudo.
Okay. Well, thank you, Randy, for describing that a little bit more for us. The next question that we have is, does color determine how robust the olive oil is?
I mean, not really. My father always told me that color has to do in part with the land where the trees are planted, and in part, mostly with, and also the type of olives that, that you grow. So color actually has to do more with, so depending on what you want to do with the olive oil, you might want to pay attention more to color. So for example, if you, although you can fry with any olive oil, and any olive oil is good for frying, light colored olive oil tends to be better for those things, simply because the flavor, they are lighter types of olive oils. Whereas the darker olive oils, I use, for example, for preparing sauces, or those sorts of things. But people wonder about what is it with the color of olive oil, and and a lot has to do with the type of olives that are used to make the olive oil.
Okay, great. And actually, you're talking about the flavor a little bit is a nice segue into our next question. Somebody asked if you could talk a little bit more about pairing olive oil, particular olive oils with particular foods. And this person said they're especially interested in figuring out what to do with a bitter Portuguese oil versus a milder Italian oil.
Right. Well, I tend to use milder olive oils for foods that are raw, that you eat raw. And so, for example, if you go to Portugal or Spain or Italy, oftentimes you will see that people serve on a little plate. They put a little bit of olive oil, and then they bring you some bread. The less bitter olive oils, because the taste is, the olive oil is not mixed with food. They tend to be better for those things, or to be put on salads. So raw food that we eat, salads and just in bruschetta, that sort of thing. The more bitter olive oils are actually simply because of the bitterness. And bitter doesn't necessarily mean bad. It means it's a matter of taste. We tend to use them more for cooking. The lighter olive oils are also used for baking. So in Italy we do bake. We make cookies and cakes with olive oil, and it tends to be the lighter type of olive oil. Whereas the more bitter olive oil we use more for foods that are more dense. Like tomato sauces, or with roasts in the oven. So things where the bitterness of the olive oil won't get to you as much.
Okay. You mentioned the cookies and the cakes, and I know, Lauren, you mentioned that as part of the presentation as well. And some people may actually have been surprised to hear that you can make the cookies and the cakes with the olive oil. Are there other foods that people might be surprised where olive oil is a unique ingredient?
I think that one thing that's interesting, if I take this one, is that pretty much wherever you need a fat, you can use olive oil, right? So you have to imagine for all these centuries and people were having olive oil, they weren't also sometimes turning butter, or, you know, they didn't have Whole Foods to go get canola oil if the recipe called for it, or sunflower oil. So it's really versatile. I tend to use it, I think, in maybe the traditional ways. I put it on everything that I can. I use olive oil probably every day, probably too much olive oil, but hey, it got me here to see all you wonderful people. I see Ernie's chuckling at me, but it's very true. My daughter's first birthday cake was an olive oil cake because she loves that for some crazy reason. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a kid cake to me, but I think that what's surprising is that it really transfers across things. So if you need to substitute a fat, olive oil can do a really nice job of that. So you can use it. For example, we've used it in pancakes.
Well, that's interesting too.
If I could say something else that might be surprising, my grandmother, for example, used olive oil on her hair. And so, you know, she would wash her hair and, you know, she would put a little drop of olive oil. I mean, also men in the southern part of Italy would do this. You know, they would, you know, put it, you know, you wash your hair and then so that the hair doesn't become fluffy and you can kind of manage it. Then, you know, they would put a little bit of olive oil and then they would just run it on their head, on their hair. And I have to say that, you know, when I spent a few months on a sabbatical in California, in Palo Alto. And you know, I actually went over there and looked for olive oil, and they have very, very good olive oil, by the way. And there was one that smelled just like the olive oil that my family makes. So, you know, I decided, well, I'm just gonna try it and see what happens. I never tried it before. And it's, you know, it's very healthy. You know, of course, you're not supposed to put too much, you know, you put just a few drops and then you go like this and then you run it on the hair.
Very interesting. So it's not just for use with food either. Fascinating.
Skincare, dry hands, crazy frizzy curly hair. Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Not that I have to worry about crazy frizzy curly hair myself. Giuli, you mentioned briefly about the sabbatical in California, and you mentioned briefly that the California olive oil that you tasted was a good one. Somebody actually asked, just in general, about, and Lauren, you could answer this as well, your thoughts about California olive oils in general.
I mean, what is it that California doesn't make that is good? I mean, it seems like, you know, you say California, and they have such diverse climates. You can find anything in California. But I must say that climates where you can grow wine tend to be climates where you can also, so where you can grow, not wine, you don't grow wine, where you can grow grapes, tend to be climates where you can also grow olives. And so my father not only, you know, he grew, he had olive trees, but he also had a small vineyard. And, you know, and sometimes certain olive oils may have a little bit of a suave, fruity taste because they are right next to these vineyards. And of course, things cross-pollinate. And so, which, you know, it may not, I don't know, my parents did it this way because they had a very small piece of land. Clearly, in California, this is not done this way. But my guess would be that, you know, just as California has excellent wines, it must also have excellent olive oils. The ones that I tried when I lived in Palo Alto were excellent olive oils.
That's good to know. We've had a couple of folks ask how rainfall and climate and terrain or topography affect the taste and the quality of the olive oils.
It's an excellent question because it really is fundamental. And, you know, and if I could give an example so that people can relate more to this, to the question, they have tried for many decades, people have tried to see if they can imitate cheeses from different parts of the world. So Parmesan cheese. And, and of course, Parmesan cheese is not only made in Italy, but it's made in other parts of the world. And if you go to local supermarkets in your local stores, you're going to find Parmesan cheese. But the taste of it is completely different than the taste of what you buy here locally, made here locally, is very different from the taste of the Parmigiano that they make in Italy. And the reason is the cows, the milk, what the cows eat, all right? And it's exactly the same with the olive oil. The terrain, the amount of water, how much rain the terrain gets, how people fertilize the trees and how you treat them. All of those things are gonna matter when you're growing olive trees. So definitely, the rain is not the same all over the world. And I don't know if you ever tasted rain, but I actually, for another trip that I had, with one of the students who's actually probably still here, we went to Colombia, and in a particular small town where we used to go, there wasn't really running water. And so, we needed to collect rain to be able to, wash ourselves and so forth. And, once in a while I would try the rain water to see what it tastes like. And, it's not a very good thing to do, but, if you're a curious person, you'll see that rain doesn't taste the same all over the world, just like drinking water doesn't taste the same all over the world. But the question about the terrain is an excellent question, because it's basically, it's fundamental. It's fundamental.
Okay, good to know. This is a question I'm sure that's on everybody's mind. Now that I've opened these lovely 4 bottles of olive oil, how long will they last? Oh, yeah. And what's the best way to store them?
All right, yes. So the best way to store them is, if they are glass bottles, just keep them in their glass and keep them in a cool, dry, dark place. So inside a cabinet. And people think that olive oil doesn't expire, but it does. And so you can keep olive oil for about 2 years. Most olive oils you can keep for 2 years. You will know that the olive oil is beginning to go, I'm not going to say bad, but probably something that you don't want to use anymore, when it begins to taste a little bit like I don't remember the word in English, rust. There we go. So, olive oil can actually have a rusty taste. So when the olive oil begins to taste like rust, and of course we haven't tried rust, but we know what it smells like, then the olive oil probably should not be used anymore. But 2 years, 2.5 years,
okay,
more or less.
That's actually a little longer than I thought it was going to be. So I'm sure a lot of folks on tonight are glad to hear that they have 2 years to still use theirs.
Sometimes even more. I'm not gonna. The truth is that sometimes even more. So for example, we bring from Italy and from Greece yearly about 120 liters of olive oil. And I don't know. I work in liters. I don't work in gallons. But people can do the conversion, and sometimes I can't use 120 liters of olive oil in a year, or in 2 years. So I've used it. I've kept it more. 3 years, 3.5 years. As long as you know what it tastes like and what it smells like when it begins to, when its time begins to pass, then I think it's okay. Once you feel that rusty smell, then you shouldn't use it anymore.
Okay. Somebody asked, is olive oil actually made 100% from olives? They said they'd heard that some olive oil actually has smaller percentages of olives in it, and that's a good question. Are there certification processes that
right
need to be done?
Yeah, and there are certification processes. I mean, the truth is that You know, if you are familiar with the way olive oil is made, the olives, but also the pits sometimes get crushed all together. And then there are machines that actually separate the essence of the olives, and they throw them in one side, and then the liquid gets thrown in another side, and then the liquid gets divided into the olive and the water, because of course olives have a lot of water too. And so I suppose that a lot has to do with you know, how it is that people keep olive oil, you know, how it is that people keep their machinery when they're making olive oil. And the machine has to be cleaned constantly so that you don't get bits of things going from one place to another. But, you know, the machines also themselves separate, you know, all these things so that you don't get pieces of olive inside the olive oil. But, you know, pieces of olives should not be in olive oil. The olive oil should be the squeezed olives. So there is the liquid, the fat liquid that comes from the squeezed olives.
I think I'd just like to add a little bit, Bill. There have been some stories in the past about people mixing different types of olive oils, and like in the, you know, decades ago, some sort of nefarious actors, but that's really not what you're going to find easily on the shelves in a grocery store. You're going to be able to identify the olive oil, and if it has those certifications on it, and if it says extra virgin olive oil, you should expect it to be made of olives and not have anything, you know, unexpected in the bottle.
Yeah. Okay. And if I could add one more thing,
sure.
Because some people have asked me, you know, what's the difference between extra virgin and virgin? It has to do with when you press it. So extra virgin olive oil is the first press, and then virgin olive oil is the next press. And of course, you know, when you pass the paste a second time through. So, you know, and so clearly the first press is the best olive oil, then the purest, the most tasteful. Not to say that that virgin olive oil is not good, simply that it's not, the quality is not as good.
Okay, good to know. And Lauren, you also noted in the chat, if folks are interested in learning more about certified varieties, that you can visit the North American Olive Oil Association for more information there. So while we're talking about pressing, somebody asked, is cold pressed better?
Yes,
in terms of...
it is. Cold pressed is better. Okay. Definitely. I mean, heat will make the olives ferment, and, you know, they increase the acidity. And so, you know, and as Lauren said earlier, the best olive oil is olive oil that is low in acidity, and typically the mark is about 8%, less than 8% acidity.
Okay. During the presentation, you mentioned how important it is in terms of the harvesting, how quickly you should go from the harvesting to the processing. Once the processing is done in that time, is there a recommended time for the bottling or the next step in the process to take place?
Yeah, and the bottling tends to happen fairly quickly as well. But, you know, the most important part is actually the pressing of the olives, you know, while they are exposed to the air. Because the truth is that once the olive oil is pressed, it gets put in very, very large steel containers, you know, very, very large ones. And it's dark. And so the olive oil is kept there. And so, you know, there is more time to be able to actually fill the bottles with the olive oil. The most important thing is to make sure that once the olives are picked, that they make it through the pressing process very quickly. And then, you know, once they're pressed, they can stay there for some time.
Okay, great. Here's a interesting question for both of you. Somebody would like to know if you have a favorite variety of olives, not just the oil, but a favorite variety of olives.
Well, I do. My mother-in-law is Greek. And so Greek olive oils are delicious. And in fact, she actually makes her own olives from the, the eating olives, from picking olives from the trees. So those have to be treated in a particular way. I think that my favorite olives are the Kalamata olives. And the Kalamata olives are from a region of Greece called Kalamata. I mean, Spanish olives are also delicious, actually.
Okay. Lauren, how about you?
So I also have benefited from Giuli's mother-in-law, and I would say that her mother-in-law's olive oil is hands down my favorite olive oil. It's there. It's the first one behind me. Everyone in my house asks me for permission before they use the olive oil because it's so good. I'm a total flake, though, to be honest. A total flake. When I'm in Spain, I'm like, this is the best, obviously. When I'm in Italy, I'm like, oh, this is the best, of course. I just love it. But I actually don't eat olives, like plain olives. I know.
Interesting.
Yeah, my husband, Jeff, he eats all of my olives for me. So I'm a big olive oil fan, but I don't eat plain olives. I mean, if they're on something or in something, absolutely. But I don't, which makes my Spanish friends don't approve.
Oh, that's funny. We have a couple more questions and we're getting close to our time, but I think we can get these questions in. What is done to the rest of the olives after they are pressed, the pits and the pulp? Are the stems also pressed?
No. And in fact, when the olives are picked, and they fall in the tarp, what has to happen before the little olives go inside the machinery is all the stems need to be pulled away because they're acid. And so, all of those stems, all of the little leaves get pulled away. And in fact, my mother used to have to pull them off by hand and then place the olives inside a barrel. And then my father would take them to get pressed. But no, the stems are not pressed. The leaves don't make it through the system. I mean, they're separated. And, obviously now they have machines that separate all of these automatically and very efficiently.
Is there an average lifespan for an olive tree?
Well, that's a really good question. I can tell you that the olive trees that my father used, had to make the olive oil were from his great-grandmother. I mean, they take a long time to grow. These olive trees, they take a long time to mature. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that once that the problem is most likely a problem of how much fruit a very old tree can give. And so, more than, the olives not being good, because what makes a good olive is the soil where it grows. So I bet that yes, if the tree is very old, it won't produce as much fruit.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how long does it take on average for a tree to actually mature to the point that it can start producing olives?
Well, I should know the answer to that question, but I don't. So I don't know where somebody can Google it while we are here. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, because I've been surrounded by very old trees, I really don't know. That's a very good question.
We'll see if we can track that down and share that with people after the fact.
Great.
Yeah. All right. How many olives are needed to make 1 liter of oil?
That's I mean, yeah, that's another one of those good questions. And it's hard to answer because it depends on the size of the olives. So not all olives that have received a lot of rain are going to be bigger, are going to be healthier. Olives that, clearly the olive trees get treated because they do get sicknesses. And then, the harvest is completely lost. So, I should ask my dad My dad actually was supposed to have been here, but he couldn't make it. He would have been able to answer that question. My mom, I'm sure, knows it too. But I don't know. I don't know exactly how many olives are needed to do a.
Okay. Well, we do have our crack researcher, Ellen, looking in the background, and she says that she saw it takes an average of 5 to 8 years for a tree to be mature enough to start producing. So we do have an answer.
Okay, I would have guessed 10, but you know, it's
okay.
No, yeah, 5 to.
Okay.
Julie, I think you are a little bit right, though. I think some of the presses wait until that year because the fruit is, you know, a little bit different after it's been maturing for a few years. And I think we're looking, just to give a general sense, about like 5-6 kilograms of olives. So, you know, depending on the olive side, I don't know how many olives themselves. That's sort of what we're looking at for about a liter of olive oil. So quite a bunch, a lot of olives, so many olives.
That is a lot of olives. Is there an official scale for measuring the robustness or the richness of the olive oils?
Oh, I'm sure there is. I mean, my knowledge of olive oil is knowledge that I've learned by looking at my dad. I'm sorry, I don't know, but I would guess that there is.
Okay. And I think we have time for one more question. Somebody asked if you could discuss a little bit more, going back to the trees themselves, discuss the role of pruning in terms of the fruit production.
Yeah, I mean, my dad used to prune the trees because, you know, branches that, for example, were not as healthy. So he would prune the trees so that new branches would come out, to give room for the new branches to come out. You know, and I did observe him, you know, when I was younger and I would go to the town to visit him, you know, after, you know, he would constantly prune trees. And, you know, there is a particular way, and I wish I could describe how, in which you are supposed to prune the tree. It's not that you just do it from anywhere. You know, and he always corrects me, for example, at home, when I pruned my little plants and my sort of, you know, rosemary and that sort of thing. He's like, no, you're not supposed to do it from there. But, you know, I don't know from where you're supposed to do it. So I just cut it from wherever. But it is important because pruning gives room for the new branches to grow. Okay. It is very important.
Okay. Well, I think that we are just about at the end of our time for this evening. So Giuli, Lauren, I want to thank you both so much for your time tonight, for this presentation. And I'd also like to thank Sue and Michael for being willing to be our taste testers on screen this evening. And thank you everybody who joined us tonight. This was a fascinating presentation, and I hope you all enjoyed yourself, and hope that we all get to see each other in person soon. And if not, then we look forward to hosting a similar event like this in the near future. So be safe and be well. And Lauren, Giuli, anything you'd like to add before we say goodnight?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining this evening, and Sue and you know, all the people that I know and all the people that I just met and whose faces I just saw. It has been so much fun creating this presentation, working with the college to connect with all of you. And you know, we plan to do more events like this one with our alumni. And we hope this is not the last time we see you. I have very good visual memories, so I hope I know I will remember some of your faces in the future. Life, I know, is very, very busy, but we're very, very grateful that you have joined us tonight. And of course, we always want to hear from you. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate your attention, and we look forward to working with you soon. Grazie.
Thank you again, both. And everybody have a good night and be well.
Buonasera.